Hi, welcome to the second episode of Off the Page with Melissa K. I'm your host, Melissa K. Anderson, an actor and a mom here in Los Angeles. You may know me from my irreverent rant/news pundit-esque podcast, Woke with Kids, but here I try my best to bring you an intimate and engaging conversation with an artist that I'm blessed to know. We talk shop about their artistic journeys, including but not limited to their process, inspirations, and visions for the future. My guest for this long-awaited episode is one of my oldest and dearest friends, Danielle Anderson-Craig. Danielle Anderson-Craig has been creating stories, writing poetry, and dancing between realms of whimsy since she was a small child. She is a full-time believer in all things magical and uses her writing to build enchanted fortresses of wonder where fantasy and surreality reign supreme. Please join me as I dig into Danielle's love affair with writing, how it has served as a life preserver for her over the years, and the tragic loss of her great love that inspired this children's book, The Magic of We. Say something. Yeah. Okay. Oh my God, we're going. So, Danielle, I've known you for a long time, but my Off the Page listeners, this is their first introduction to you. So please let us know a little bit about yourself, your background, who you are, and then we'll just get going into talking about this fabulous book that you wrote, The Magic of We.
Alrighty, I'm happy to, and thank you for having me on. Glad to be here.
Of course, I'm so excited that you are taking some time to talk with me about this.
Me too. So my name is Danielle Anderson-Craig, and I am a poet. I am the author of The Magic of We, and I'm also a longtime Montessori early childhood educator. And I'm a longtime friend of yours, Miss Melissa. We go so far back.
I know. I never feel old, and I'm not calling you old. That's my disclaimer.
Best to not be. Let's start there.
But sometimes I look back, and whenever I can say, oh, something has been happening for a decade, or I've known someone for a decade or more, but I'm going to be really vague about the more part, then I'm like, whoa, what happened? Because I believe when we met, we were
Melissa,
both freshmen.
We met 2 decades ago.
We were both freshmen at USC here in Los Angeles, little babies. You were 16 years old.
I was 16 years old at USC. And I should not have been anywhere near half the things we got into at USC.
And I was 17. I was the 17-year-old with a car. And somehow we were like, yes, bring it. And we didn't know what the hell we were getting into. I certainly didn't. But I knew.
Nope.
But I do know this because you had met Chris, our mutual friend Chris, I guess at orientation.
Yeah.
And I knew Chris from high school. We worked at the same mall. And we're buddies.
Gosh, how cute.
We were buddies. And he introduced us. I remember that. He was like, I think you guys are going to like each other. Your last name is both Anderson. And I do feel, and you guys are both from the Inland Empire. And I will say this, it was kind of an immediate, like, kindred spirit. I felt like, okay, I get it. I feel like I know this girl, and I feel like this girl is going to know me and not judge me because she knows like where I come from and what it's like out there. And I felt really young. You seemed really young.
Because I was.
I know, right? Maybe it was a little like, oh, she even younger than me. Like, damn, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I think if we stick together, we're going to be okay.
And we did, Mel. We were fast friends.
Yeah,
we were super fast friends.
I know. And I love that even as the years have gone by and with every relationship, you know, there are ebbs and flows, but we've always come back together as even stronger than ever. And I appreciate it so much more, I think, at this current stage, at this age, than I ever did before or could have really imagined. I don't know. Maybe I am getting old because now, like, people who are really kind and genuine and, like, really there for you or really listen and help you feel seen are just the world to me right now.
Yeah.
And you take it for granted, I think.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And that's a great segue into talking about the book.
I
That
was
is
just
exactly
thinking that.
what the book is about.
I was just thinking that you're like one of my magical people.
Yeah. And you are for sure like top echelon of my magic tribe.
Okay, I can't start crying yet. Okay, hold on. Before we totally jump into the book, I also want to bring up the fact that at USC, were you a creative writing major, or you just took a lot of English creative writing classes?
I wanted to go into journalism initially at USC.
Did you really?
I really did. And then I got turned off somehow. And then you and I took a class together. Do you remember that class that we took together when we had to recite like
the Canterbury Tales, the root.
One
the prologue,
something.
the bath, and oh my god! Sorry, guys.
But he wanted us to recite this part of the Canterbury Tales,
the prologue in Old English,
with an Old English accent, and I was like, "This is way too white. I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
this is ridiculous."
Yeah,
and it just turned me off. It didn't feel like I was sinking my teeth into the things I wanted to sink my teeth into at USC. And then also what really happened was I took a philosophy course and fell in love with it. So then that kind of made me go that direction.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah. But creative writing was just the thing that I liked to do, outside of the silly classes.
Sure.
Outside of the silly classes. So spoken word was my jam back then.
That was another thing we fell into, I guess maybe freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't remember where we went or whatever, but I remember we got a little flyer. I got a flyer. Yep. And I feel like it said Dante from Hook. Like, I feel like it told us that it was Dante Basco hosting. And
really?
I wouldn't have known the name. Do you think it just said spoken word and we went?
I thought so.
Maybe. I don't know. It's so freaking long ago that literally I can't remember. Long story short, Danielle and I were one of the first audience members of what has now become the Poetry Lounge, which is a huge spoken word, almost like institution here in LA.
It absolutely is that.
And for years and years, it's been at the Greenway Court Theater on Fairfax. And it has given such a platform for writers and artists and poets and spoken word artists, which was still kind of a relatively newer term.
It was.
To find their footing and to be seen and workshop their work and gain fans before like Instagram was there to just gain followers. You had to really do something. No shade to my influencer pals, but you really had to show up and show us people something before they were your fan. Yeah. It was not, pictures and quotes alone. And so Danielle and I fell into that. And, in the early days, it hopped around a little bit from a little, restaurant here to a little lounge theater, another place like on Cahuenga.
One time it was in Dante Bosco's living room, right?
We did go. Somehow we rolled up, and I remember. You know what? I remember because Simon Rex was there, and me growing up in the '90s, I had such a crush on him because he was an MTV DJ. I remember being like, "Oh my God, Simon Rex is in the house!" Okay, so yeah, we had it at his house, and so we were there when Shihan first kind of came on the scene in that big way, and
Sekou
and
Bridget Gray
and InQ
and Saul Williams would even come through.
Oh my God, yeah,
and
Saul
Gnu,
Williams, yep,
and Jamel, like all of our people.
Jamel is still there. I still see him, and it's like, whoa, we know each other from way back.
From way back.
Shit, I saw
that
Gnu.
was such a special time.
It really was. I think for me, and I really want to hear your thoughts on it too, for me being like so young and kind of impressionable, and it being my first like foray into quote unquote the real world, everything outside of like my really sheltered, super Christian life. I was so grateful for that because, you know, there's so much drinking in college and, you know, we had tried to go out to clubs. And although it was fun, I didn't feel safe, really, for lack of a better word. But I remember once we fell into the poetry scene and going into a theater or like an intimate space, and hearing people share words about their feelings and their experiences and really being moved and touched and kind of getting to know people through their art or through the expression really just set the course of the rest of my time in college and kind of on my path to adulthood a little bit more than I realized.
Yeah, it was really special for me. It was transformative for me. You know, like in high school, I was obsessed with Love Jones and Saul Williams Slam, and I was writing poetry all the time, but it was for the page, you know. And so once we kind of found the Poetry Lounge scene, and I was seeing all these people on stage performing and just being so naked before everyone and doing it with such fearlessness, it really was just like entirely galvanizing to me. Like we were just able to leave campus and get on the road for like 20 minutes and be in this rich world,
Right.
you know, of like so many unique, beautifully talented and strong people. And it helped me find my voice to get up on stage, and it helped me to learn to like show up in life the way that I learned to show up on stage in that scene. Because I was so proud to be sharing a stage with people like Bridget Gray and Sekou and Shihan and Dante. Do you remember that we would go to
Denny's?
Roscoe's? Oh, was it Denny's?
Well, it depends on which.
Denny's on Sunset and Gower.
It depends on which lounge the Poetry Lounge had been at. When we started going to Tanner's, it's funny because now I live by this goddamn Tanner's in Culver City, and I remember being so confused and lost trying to find it. What was that guy's name? Like, not Dante, maybe? No, there was another dude, and he started running one at this Tanner's coffee shop that is still there on Sepulveda in Culver City. And after that night, that was like the Thursday night, the Poetry Lounge was the Tuesday night, we would go to that Denny's on Jefferson. And that was one that I remember because I remember in one particular evening, Rosario Dawson was there.
That's what I was just about to talk about. So I remember she had been there with Dante, maybe at the Poetry Lounge.
Right.
And then she came to eat afterwards, and I was like seated across from her.
Yeah.
And during this time, do you remember when me and Jasmine Simmons were performing together under the moniker Tuesday Moonblood? And she would sing and I would spit, and it was just like we couldn't be told shit back then. You couldn't tell us nothing.
But that was part of what I loved about it. Not to cut you off, I loved the bravery. I never really felt like I could do it, but I still felt braver by proximity to all of you guys doing it. So even if the poem was bad or I didn't respond to it, there was still, I had to give respect where it was due to go up there and say whatever it is you wanted to say. Okay, back to Tuesday Moonblood, which I would not have remembered by name.
Yes, back to Tuesday Moonblood. So we had performed that night, and Rosario Dawson was so sweet. She was like across from like my 17-year-old self. Maybe I was 18.
Yeah.
And she like stops and like looks up from her fork, and she's like, you know, I really liked what you had to say tonight. You brought up some really interesting points, and you guys were awesome. And I like probably choked on my moons over my hammy.
You did always get moons over my hammy.
Because that was my jam. And I was like, oh God, my 18 or 17-year-old self can die. Like, what?
That was a really
it was such a special time. Like, I grew up so much in that scene. And it really only lasted, you know, from like 16 to 20 for me. I still kind of stuck to page poetry the whole way through, but stage poetry, I probably kept with it for like a couple of years after leaving USC. But without that community, I just kind of, you know, went back into page poetry and that was fine because I wanted a break from stage poetry anyway. Once I started to hear everyone talk like this,
right,
and everyone inflect the same way, like eventually I was just like, I can't listen to this.
Well, I remember
any
once there was a huge line to get into Greenway Court Theater. You had to get there an hour early. I felt like I was back at the club. Once I felt like I was back at the club with the line and people were dressing up to be seen, and it was like everything was the performance now. It was less and less of the vulnerability. And for me, what I respond to, I'm realizing now in art in any form really, is the intimacy. That's my thing. That's what I really love. So once that dissipated or lessened to such a degree, I stepped away as well.
Yep.
And, but that is a good time for us to kind of shift a little bit. So you were still writing poetry. And, I've brought you on to Off the Page today to talk about writing a children's book. So I would love to hear a little bit about that journey, specifically in terms of the writing. Did you always think that you could or wanted to write a children's book? Or, and really, what is the difference? Like, what's your process kind of look like for writing poetry? Are you at a desk? Are you like a Hemingway and a J.D. Salinger? You write every day and it's always poems? Or do you go out in nature and you see what's inspiring you? And then how has it shifted in terms of the process of writing a children's book?
Okay.
I know that's like a lot in one
question. There's a lot of questions in there.
Take your
time. Let's see. So I will start with the question about moving from poetry for adults to writing a children's book.
Okay.
I think the best, and I've been reading children's books for a long, long time. You know, it's like what I do with my day is spending time with children who are 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old. And we rally around a storybook, a picture book, a collection of poetry, or books for children. We rally around words on a daily basis for at least, 35 to 45 minutes. So I've been doing this for a very long time. And I love children's books. And the best ones are the ones that speak up to children, and I think also speak up to adults. And there's not been a difference for me in writing a book for children and writing poems for adults, other than, subject matter, of course. Sure.
Right. Okay.
Right. There's that. But it wasn't like some voice in my head had to be shifted because I'm writing for children,
That makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Jump in. No.
Well, I was going to say that actually makes sense because I find that for me, the best poetry is the most, is where simplicity kind of reigns.
Sure.
And it really allows the essence of what the emotion or the image or whatever it is to really kind of shine. And I think specifically with poetry, simplicity might be key. And I also find that I have 2 kids, so I read a lot of children's books, definitely not as many as you, but I find that the stories that I respond to as an adult or the children respond to are oftentimes much simpler than, other types of books. And that's really what enables the kids to understand the new concept or the moral or the lesson or whatever it is. So I hadn't really thought about it before, but as you said that, I realized that there is kind of a very a strong commonality of that kind of aim for simplicity in both poetry and children's books. So it maybe isn't as much of a leap as it would seem.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It's about distilling something profound and beautiful into something that is palatable and accessible.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Really
So
great.
in that regard, it wasn't different for me at all.
I find that too. It's like when things align, when there's a lot of obstacles and conflict, something's off. I'm finding more and more that as things ease, there's an ease and a flow to whatever it is you're trying to do. I think that's the universe's way of saying, yes, keep going that way.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree. And I had been kind of dreaming of writing books for children for a long time, just because I've been writing and I've been working with children for so long. The two things I've done the most are write and work with children. So, so it just to me made sense that I would do that eventually. And I'm so glad that it's finally a thing that I can say I'm doing.
Well, so am I, and I think it's really come together, really beautifully. It's funny, I think, again, sometimes when you're young, you see your adult life seems so nebulous. You don't know what's going to happen, but really you are taking steps. Sometimes your subconscious or the universe is really steadily pushing you towards what it is. And all you have to do sometimes is get out of your own way and look back and be like, oh, shit, I've been writing for 20 years. I've been teaching for 15 years. Maybe I've been teaching kids for, you know what I mean? Maybe I should put the two together. And then you're like, ah. So, okay, that's really wonderful to hear. I feel like there are writers who wonder sometimes if you start in one genre, so to speak, like how locked in to it are you? And if at all. And I think, what are your thoughts on that? How easy do you feel like it might be to move throughout different types of genre of writing? Or is it really just something you just feel like people should try?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think people should definitely just try it. But what I have been thinking about for a while since the book's been out, it's been out for a few months, something that I struggle with is, okay, if I want to now publish a book of poetry for adults, that would be kind of reaching back into years of writing. How would that be seen side by side along with a children's book? Would the content be scrutinized more heavily because my debut as an author has been writing this book for children. So it is something that I'm even still kind of chewing up and figuring out. But I think ultimately, what's going to be true is just that the world wants to hear what people have to say. And I think giving this book enough time to breathe is what I'm focusing on right now. And then moving into going back to my poetry for adults roots will be a natural step after this one has enough time to kind of find roots in the world.
A bit of a life on its own.
Yeah.
I mean, I could definitely go down the rabbit hole on this train of thought because now I'm like, what about short stories? What about this? What about that? But
yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. But the truth is that poetry is that's just it for me.
Okay.
I journal, and I have been journaling like an insane person since I was physically able to write, and I have countless half-filled black and white composition notebooks in my closet. That go all the way back to like me being 16 years old, collecting dust, but still very precious to me.
Yes.
And all that journaling that I do, that's something that I do just for me as kind of therapeutic sense-making exercise, and I do it a lot. But poetry, when I sit down to write something that I want to share, poetry is the shape that I'm most naturally inclined to pour myself into.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
On that note, what inspires you to write your poetry?
Which
is obviously a very broad. I know, right? It's a very broad question.
But
So,
it's a great question.
No
and the
pressure.
Answer, honestly, is everything.
Yeah.
Everything. The answer is everything. Everything. Geez. Yeah, it's such a big question. Writing, at the risk of sounding dramatic.
We will. Side note: we welcome all the drama. Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
wonderful.
Please.
Great. Yeah. At the risk of sounding hella dramatic, writing really has always been a life preserver for me. I mean, it actually has saved my life on more than one occasion and in more phases of life than a couple.
Yeah.
As a child, I came to writing because there were a lot of heavy and confusing and abusive experiences that I was experiencing and had to grapple with in the formative years, and they persisted throughout all of my growing up until I left, for SC when I was 16. And children are not equipped to deal with that stuff on their own. They shouldn't have to ever.
Right.
And so what often happens is we grow up really quickly and we learn to be protectors of our own light when the people entrusted with that responsibility are not capable. And so writing was initially my fortress, and then my moat, and then my steed, and then my shield, and then my sword.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And what's true about back then, that's still true to this day, is that I get to use my writing as a personal time machine. When I'm overwhelmed by something beautiful, or overwhelmed by something horrible, or overwhelmed by a feeling that a certain person always creates in me, or overwhelmed by an extended eye contact exchange with someone I didn't expect to be penetrated by, or anything, or any idea, or any emotion, or anything at all. It can be something acute or something much more expansive than that, but I get to stop all the sensory stimulation and then just listen to all the ways that thing is now reverberating within me. And I get to pause the outside noise, and the thing, whatever it was, becomes something that I then get to redefine or reinvent or relocate or reassign. And I try to honor that experience, or my experience of that thing, by sitting with it meditatively, and then giving it what I try to make a sacred cloak to wear eternally, and then hope that resonates and finds homes outside of myself.
Beautifully said from the writer. There's nothing I can add to that. I think that's exactly true, and I think that will resonate with a lot of people who are human, really. Not even just artists. We are all constantly bombarded by the sense, what our senses are picking up. And I think that really is the beauty of art, and especially writing, but all art forms, is it gives you, exactly as you stated, a way to kind of slow it down for yourself and take it in. It's almost just a deep inhale when in some yoga, then you pause for a second and then you exhale it out. Just just slow it down. The world moves so quickly around us, and I struggle with this. So it's definitely resonating with me right now, is that I can be in control, or a little bit more. I'm not subject to the wind. I'm not subject to everything rushing around me. I can say, you know what, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to step out a little bit, and I'm going to just dull it a little bit and take that time for myself to kind of process. And then I think when you're an artist, the beauty of that is now I'm going to put it back out with my point of view on it. And the more specific that can be, you know, there's a chance where other people it will resonate with others, as you've said.
Yeah.
All right. I'm rubbing my hands now because I want to talk about The Magic of We, this amazing book that you wrote.
Mel.
I love it. I mean, you know, and I know like the history and the backstory, and I know you and all of that, but I just think it's a book that is filled with so much heart, and again, that's what I respond to, basically. So
thank you.
Please tell us, me and our listeners, what inspired The Magic of We, and a little bit about the journey.
Yeah.
How long did it take, and all of the stuff?
Okay, happy to. Let's start with the what inspired it.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, I had been, you know, dreaming of writing books for kids for a while. So 2014, I was like finally, well, in 2007, I had like been trying to write this like the quintessential butterfly metamorphosis book, and it's been like the bane of my existence ever since. And it's just been too crazy and insane. So I left that. I like come back to that every year, and it's still not perfect, and that's that. But in 2014, in the summertime, I was traveling through Nicaragua, and I was like learning how to surf for the very first time at 32, and I was making communion with the ocean every single day for hours upon hours, and I was in this place where I was meditating all the time, like for hours. Like I'd wake up in the morning, like 5 a.m., meditate on the beach, and then get into the ocean. And that was meditative as well. And I was just like, and I was in bed by 10 every night, and like up at 5 to do it all over again. And it was during that time, excuse me, when the skeleton of the poem kind of came to me. So the framework of like being with you is, and then, you know, this, and that too. So that like the bones made themselves known to me during that time. Cause I was just in this really, I feel like I was a clear vessel at the time, like spending so much time in the water and being so meditative and being with myself in such a present way. And so the bones came then, and then, and also during that time, you know, Ike and I were well on our way to making plans for the next stage of our relationship, and those plans included me wrapping up the school year, 2014 and 15, and then moving to Nashville, where he had moved to be closer to Jack White, because he was now playing for Jack White.
I'm going to jump in real quick and ask that you just give a little bit more about who Ike was.
Yeah. Yes.
So that they know
right.
who this person was in the world and to you.
Okay. Yeah. So Ike Owens, Isaiah Ike Owens, was my very best friend and long-term partner for 10 years. And he is best known in the world for being, keyboard player and organist and music producer who started off in Long Beach, and he played with Long Beach Dub All-Stars and kind of was in that Sublime crew. He's actually, Mel, did you know that Ike's in the Sublime video for The Wrong Way?
What I got? Oh.
For The Wrong Way. He's one of the 7 horny brothers.
Oh my God, I'm totally going to look that up. I remember he told me a funny story about him and Bradley Noel.
Yeah.
So I will happily be looking that up after the podcast.
Ridiculous.
I was in Garden Grove the other day. Sorry, offline story I have to share. But yes, okay, so he was part of the kind of Long Beach scene.
Yeah, he's like, kind of like an institution in the Long Beach music scene for sure. And we met when I was living in Long Beach at the tender age of 23. Goodness. Oh my God, I'm so young. Babies. We met then. And then we proceeded to love each other in all sorts of ways and forms for the next 10 years. And we had our incarnations and our iterations of what we were to each other, and we always were family. He was the only man I had ever lived with, and I was the only woman he'd ever lived with, and we were living in Berkeley together for a time, and we had gone through all these different movements of loving each other. And like I said, always best friends and family, no matter what we were calling ourselves to each other.
And this is also during the time that he had incredible professional success as a musician in the bands. Was he in At the Drive-In?
No, so he was
after.
Yeah, so right after At the Drive-In, Omar and Cedric were doing De Facto, and Ike was there during De Facto. And then Omar and Cedric started up the Mars Volta, and Ike was there for that whole process. And
Mars Volta legend.
Played with Mars Volta for a very long time. When I met Ike, I think he was playing with Mars Volta. I didn't know who Mars Volta was when I met Ike, but I knew that he was about to leave for tour.
I think this was just when they had gotten super huge. Like that second album, I feel like maybe
2004 when I met Ike.
Yeah, that second album was just, it was like they were getting crazy radio play, and all of a sudden everyone had heard of them. Somewhere around there.
So he had a long tenure with Mars Volta, and then I think in 2010 he was no longer playing with them for lots of reasons, and then was invited to play with Jack White on the Blunderbuss tour.
Yeah,
and that would have been like 2011 or 12, and then was playing for Lazaretto as well, and I think recorded on Lazaretto, and then mind you, during that time, like outside of that, playing with literally everybody and their mama, like,
and producing music, and had his own music.
Yeah,
Free Moral Agents coming out. Non-stop
exactly,
musician,
non-stop
traveling.
Non-stop.
So this is the backdrop of your relationship while you were kind of teaching and living in the Bay Area.
Right. Yes. And so, because he traveled all the time, it was really hard for us to get our shit together, honestly. But after all the years together and loving each other so deeply, we were finally like ready to transition out of the spottiness and into like going back to being solid again and like living together. And so that catches me up to where we are now.
Yeah.
Let's see, August comes around and I come home from Nicaragua, and then school starts in September, and Ike and I are just like all about this coming together and like getting it right, getting it together again. And he was playing with Jack White at the time, and in October of 2014, on the 14th, he unexpectedly passed away of a heart attack while in Puebla, Mexico, for after a show with Jack White. And all of us were obviously devastated. Everyone around him, we were all crushed. And, it was entirely unexpected. Like the night before that happened, I was writing and I was missing him and thinking of him. And I just sent him a text that said, Ike, I love you. And then in the morning, I got the phone call from Lalo that they had found him in his hotel room and that he was no longer with us. And after I got off the phone with Lalo, I checked, because that phone call woke me up. And I checked my voicemail, and Ike had called me while I was asleep and left me a voicemail, and it just said, I love you too. And when he called me, it would have been around 2 a.m. in Mexico, where he was, and the autopsy indicated that he more than likely passed away between 3 and 4. So there's a good chance that that was the last thing he said. Because they had already gone to bed, everyone from the show that night. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I know I'm the host here, like crying and not filling up the silence. But
sorry, I just needed.
I think that it more than deserves a moment, because it's a tragedy. But it's beautiful. It's beautifully tragic in that the last sentiments from both of you were sending love to each other. And I don't know anyone alive who wouldn't wish that for themselves and their loved one. Absolutely. And, unexpected deaths happen all the time. Yep. And so I think more often than not, you don't get a chance to say that. Yep. To anyone if it's unexpected. Yep. So it's an amazing gift that that's your your final memory of communicating with him, and not even just that you sent that love, that he sent it back. And
I still have that voicemail.
Of course. Yeah. Keep that shit forever.
Yeah, sure.
So
so I will try to.
I know. Take your time. And one question to help bring it back around is, during this time, as before his passing, had you still been working on the book, or since you had the basic bones and framework for the story in Nicaragua, or had it kind of, you got back into the work, into the school and the relationship? Okay.
Exactly that. I got back into the swing of school teacher life, which really didn't include a lot of writing in the very beginning of the year, especially because things are just like full force. So I had kind of shelved the being with you, this and that too, but I had it tucked away, and a couple of the images had already come to me in Nicaragua, which was like, the collection of castles under the sea, because I was spending so much time making communion with the ocean, and then the mermaids singing me to sleep, on the bottom of the ocean. Like that had come to me while I was in Nicaragua because of my time in the water. But then I kind of shelved it. And then, and before Ike passed away in August of that same year, I had met a teacher named Carly, who would end up becoming the woman who illustrated the book. And we met, she was new to the school where I was teaching, and we met at a staff meeting, and I just happened to notice her doodling during the meeting, and I kind of moseyed over to her during a break to say like, oh, what are you working on? What are you drawing over here? And why are you drawing? And she talked about being an illustrator in addition to being a teacher. And I said, we should talk about that. I would like to write books for children one day, and I'm looking for someone I can trust with that kind of energy. And she said, yeah, let's talk. And then we just kind of both got into the swing of school, and we didn't visit it again. And then after Ike passed, a couple of months after that, I was doing a lot of writing in the initial weeks after he passed away. My Instagram account became like a digital altar for him. And I was doing a lot of writing around missing him, really. And I was even kind of talking to him in ways that may have seemed insane to other people. But, there was this huge time and space break that didn't make any sense, because one day my life was doing this, and then the next day,
right,
the rest of my life looked an entirely different way. And it just my brain was not making sense of anything at all for a while. And writing, again, was the only way I could stop and try to make sense of what was happening, and what had just happened, and what this means for everybody, and where is my friend?
Yeah.
Where is my friend? Where are you? You were just here. And so I was doing a lot of poetry writing that was heavy and dark, and understandably so, but it was. And one of Ike's really good friends in Nashville is a man named Chet Wisey, and he is the editor over at Third Man Books. And I happened to meet him in August. The last time I saw Ike in person was in August, right when I got back from Nicaragua, the day that I got back. He had a couple of shows with Jack White in San Francisco at the Bill Graham. And I went for both of them and got to spend time with Ike, and he came over and stayed with me. And I met Chet at these shows, and they were really good friends, and they played music together in Nashville, one of Ike's many projects. And Ike had told Chet about me and told him that I was a writer and told him that I need to start sharing my work. And so Chet had said something to me at one of those shows, hey, Ike says you're a great poet and I would love to hear some of your work. You should submit it to me. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. And then just, went back into the business of living and teaching, and didn't. And then, of course, because we lost someone that meant everything to so many people, we all got really, really close.
Right.
And so during that time of being close with Chet, we would just check in with each other, and we agreed to be writing accountability partners. And our deal was we would check in on the 1st of every month, because December 1st is Ike's birthday. So Ike passed on the 14th of October, and we didn't check in on November 1st because it was just way too soon for that. December 1st was our first check-in, and it was during that time when I said, I want to make this children's book, and I want to make it as a tribute to Ike. And by January 1st, I promised Chet that I would give him the full flesh of it. The flesh and the bones would have come together. I would give him a manuscript by January 1st. So I did. And a lot of it happened on December 31st.
We have a procrastinator, ladies and gentlemen.
We do. But I had the bones, and I had some images already come to me. And by the time I spoke with Chet on the 1st, I had the sailing a chocolate lake in a graham cracker boat with a marshmallow master.
Yeah,
I had that one already cooking, and then I just moved away from the dark poetry I was writing in my grief, and I needed to turn it around and make it something that I could share, and make it something that celebrated all of the beauty that there is to be found when you meet someone that is family and kindred spirit and tribe, and honor what it means to love someone who you consider a chosen family.
Right. Okay.
And so that is the long answer to what inspired the magic of We.
But
The
I mean,
longest.
I feel like all of those details only enrich the understanding of the book. I mean, on its own, as a standalone book, I think it's beautiful and touching. And I think kids and adults who won't know the whole story can still sense that it's about an intimate, loving relationship that isn't necessarily romantic.
Right.
And
I certainly hope that that's how it comes across.
Definitely. I mean, there's nothing that, no, of course not. And, but the idea that I think we don't maybe talk about that or see that enough I mean, obviously we encourage relationships with children, but I think somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we get it kind of confused. That a boy and a girl, if they like each other and they're really comfortable with each other and they want to hang out all the time, they have to be dating. It means they're in love.
Or, or a girl and a girl, or a boy and a boy, or a non...
Exactly. Two adult people.
Yeah.
That there are
folks.
less and less, it's harder to maybe make new friends as you get older. And there's something just so pure about the characters in your story because, there's no baggage, there's no agenda. It's just about being with each other and how wonderful that makes you feel.
Yeah.
And so much so that they can do amazing things or nothing and just be comfortable with themselves and with the other person and just happy to be. I think it's really touching. Maybe I'm just biased, but almost even more so as an adult, because as as we, at least for me, I guess it becomes for some reason sometimes more complicated, interpersonal relationships. And it just is such a beautiful reminder of how simple it can be. And how, at least for me, that's something that I always take away from it, is that it can really be that simple in terms of interacting with people. And then again, it's like if you have to want something from each interaction with someone, maybe it's just to be seen and welcomed for who you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be any more than that. And when you find that, it can become harder and harder and more rare in our current modern society to find that. And so it really is like this magical thing, in my opinion, to kind of have that type of relationship with anyone. Sometimes it's with an older person and a younger person, or like you're saying, people from different cultures. It's really wonderful how there are no boundaries, and I like that as well. The illustrations in the book really add to the expansive, imaginative aspect to what a friendship can be. So I think you're really nailing it with the book.
Thank you.
So if you had to kind of look back and say, from that first, Chet, here's my manuscript, Carly's working on the illustrations, to its published date, how long was that period? And like how many like revisions and like what was there a lot in terms of the going back and the revising it and really getting it ready for press and everyone saying, yes, this is the book, let's move forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. The gestation period on this baby is insane. Really. I mean, so January 1st, 2015 is when I sent it to Chet, and he came back right away saying, I love it exactly the way it is. No changes. It's beautiful. What's next? And I was just like, oh, okay. All right. It's time. All right. So by the next month, I said to him, I will have, by February 1st, I will have an illustrator in place who I'm certain about. Because I was still, thinking about Carly for sure, but not sure if like it could work for her and if she could commit to the timeline, or, who knows. But then we talked about it after I sent that first piece to Chet, and she was on board. She was amazing. She was on board, and she was just like, yep, I'm with it. She knew that Ike had passed, and she saw that it was important to me. And I think initially for her, she really wanted to just help with the healing process. And I think that she kind of selflessly agreed to take on an extra workload without knowing whether or not it was ever going to see the light of day, honestly. So, because at that time, Chet and I were communicating simply as friends who are writing accountability partners. There was no understanding that I was making this book so that it could be in third man's hands.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
there were no. He was not saying we can publish this book. All you have to do is write it. Okay.
No. We were just there for each other as friends. And I probably should add here that Chet Wisey is an insanely beautiful poet himself, and Ike had always given him the same speech he'd given me, which was, you have this career that you do, for Chet being editor at Third Man Books, and for me being a teacher. However, you are a beautiful writer, and your writing isn't getting into all the spaces where it needs to be. And so he would tell Chet, you're an amazing editor at Third Man. Write more. Work on your poetry. And he would tell me, you're a beautiful teacher. Write more. Get that out into the world. And so Chet and I kind of bonded around that and agreed to honor Ike by doing that work. And so we weren't talking about making a book for Third Man. We were just talking about, are you honoring your commitment to write more? Okay, what are you working on? Let's hear it.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry again. Oh my God.
Oh no.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of a sensitive person.
You don't have to say sorry for that.
Wow, that's, God, the layers to this journey is, I think, still surprising me sometimes, which is never a bad thing.
They surprise me all the time. And they just kind of unfold in new ways every day, really.
Wow.
So let's see. That would bring us up to February of 2015.
Right.
Yes. So then, so during that time, I was also planning to leave the country.
Right.
Right. I wanted to leave the country, and I was moving to Southeast Asia with no real plans to come back to this country for a while. And so she and I began to kind of nail down, I'd send her photographs of Ike as a child, or pictures of the street where I lived when I met Ike in Long Beach, or a list of record covers that I wanted her to sneak into the book. I would talk about just certain things that were really important for me to make sure were included.
Right.
And then she would painstakingly make all of these illustrations, pencil on paper. That's it. Everything was just hand drawn, pencil on paper.
These illustrations are crazy good, because you can tell that it is drawn, each line. And Langston, my 9-year-old, is heavily into drawing now. Mm-hmm. And so one day we just sat and looked at the detail of the drawing. And for him at this age, more than the story, he was kind of losing his shit about the drawings because he's starting to understand the amount of time. I mean, he'll do something like a dragon and try to give scales. And his hand is cramping up, but for this book, it's times a million. Yeah. The grass, the details of everything. It's really impressive.
She's amazing.
It's really impressive. What you guys were able to do together.
I mean, she let me give a lot of suggestions, and I'm grateful to her for being so graceful about all of that stuff, because other artists who are doing the work of illustrating a children's book hardly ever even interact with the author.
Sure, yeah.
And it's probably for good reason.
Yeah, right? I would think so.
It's probably like, let me do what I do. Well,
Right.
because you have done what you do,
Right,
you know?
right.
But she was so lovely and kind and just graceful about all of it. And I'm just so incredibly grateful to her for letting me have as much influence as I wanted to have, or as she allowed me to have. So yeah, she really is. I'm looking at them right now while I'm talking to you, and she's just, it blows me away every
Seriously,
time.
no, I was looking at it again too, and it's startling in a really great way. But there aren't a lot of children's book that I personally have come across that have that level of detail in the illustrations. There's one other author that we have in our like home collection named Dallas Clayton, and he wrote a big book of thanks and something like, I forget the other one, but he is originally an illustrator. So he kind of they are heavily illustrated, and then he kind of wrote words to go along with it. And again, I think it's a great combination when you have kind of a really simple, heartfelt message that can really be told in words. It's almost like a visual poem in a book.
Yeah,
Exactly. Which I like, and is a nice change, I think, from a lot of the more traditional children's book, not the least of which that the two main characters are of color, and so many other things.
Yes.
So
yes.
Can you I mean, I also, there's so much more to talk about, but can you just even throw in a little bit about the discussion of making the characters in the book reflective of you and Ike being Black, and the discussion around maybe if there was how, I mean, obviously compared to decades prior, it's changed, but there are still relatively a smallish number of children's book that center children of color as the main characters.
Right. That there was no question that the characters were going to be POC. And Carly understood that without ever blinking, you know. She knows, she's been doing the work of teaching preschoolers for a long time, and she understands that representation matters in ways that are astronomical. And she knows how hard it is to find books that reflect anything other than mostly white kids.
Yeah.
And so she was on board with that, and there was never even a question about that not being the case. And it was really important to me to feature these brown children in a way where it's not about slavery, it's not about oppression in America, it's not about Black History Month. Like, it's just two children who are brown having a childhood.
Yeah.
They're having a childhood, and allowing the expanse of what that means to simply be significant on its own. Right. When we talk about like the way that brown children and Black children are disproportionately punished and expelled from schools. Yeah. And when we talk about the disparate rates of Black and brown youth incarceration, like what we're talking about when we talk about Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin, like what we're talking about is the failure, the refusal of this society to see Black children and as brown children as children. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like their childhoods are not being honored, and that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Yeah. And so it was really important to me to make this book just a part of the conversation that says, yes, Black childhood matters. Yes, Black children are entitled to the same precious, protected space that we seem to give more easily to white children. And so it was really important to me for this book to be a part of that conversation, and just to be a gift of reflection for Black and brown children, simply being explorers in the world and being children. That's it.
I love that. And I think also, like you're saying, so much of it, I think when children will have this book read to them or come across it and read it for themselves, it's again that reminder that the brown, Black children of color, the immigrant children, you know, the children of different abilities, all of that, they have the same wide open imagination.
Right.
It's not that only, you know, white children can go on these fantastical flights of fancy in their minds or with their friends, and these kids are just playing basketball or, you know, like trying to survive this, you know, infrastructure of systemic racism.
Right.
I love that it's as wide open to magic as every human being, and particularly every human child. We are all born with that, and it continually needs to be encouraged and talked about and acknowledged in people of all colors, and especially in children of all colors and sizes. And, you know, it's crazy a little bit that in 2018 we're even having this part of the conversation. But technically, but you know, you can't look around and say, does it need to be happening? Yes.
It's exciting. People are really doing some amazing things in Kidlit. Like, now that I'm in this world of Kidlit, I'm excited because I see beautiful work all the time that is just trying to do exactly what the Magic of We is trying to do.
Oh, that is awesome. That is exciting.
Blow spaces wide open for Black and brown children to simply be children. Yeah, it's great.
That's
great.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want to do now, I just want to give our listeners a little heads up, and you can take a little mini break to get some water. I want to bring in Yaze, who is my husband and co-host on my other podcast, Woke with Kids, for people who don't know. Yay. And I want to bring him in because at this point in our conversation with Danielle, I want to talk about the book's tribute to Ike, which we obviously talked about. And I want to find out how she navigates that part of the story of the book as a whole with her audiences, children and parents alike. So we're going to take a slight break. And when we come back, we will have Yaze as a fellow parent to chime in on how do we talk about death and grieving and memorials to people that we love, because that is something that the book kind of touches on. And children at that age, I mean, we'll let Danielle share what she finds children at that age to think about it. Okay, so we'll be right back. Okay, we are back. And as I mentioned, we have Yaze, my husband and co-host of Woke with Kids.
That's me.
And we are going to shift gears a little bit and are talking with Danielle.
Hey, Danielle. How you doing?
Hi, Yaze. Hi.
Long time no see.
Long time no see.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice again.
It's great to be chatting with you today.
Right on. Where are you now, anyways? Where are you?
Berkeley, always.
Always Berkeley, except when you're like remote across the sea and traveling the world. Yeah. Berkeley always. Yeah. Berkeley always. Never leave Berkeley.
It's like when you're in Nicaragua or Costa Rica or Italy or Thailand or Bali. Yeah.
Exactly.
Malaysia, except for those times. Okay.
Good. Got you triangulated now. Good.
So when I'm in one place, it's Berkeley.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, God bless Berkeley and you being with us here today.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Magic of We, as we've been talking about, this really came about as a tribute to Ike. And in the pages, hold on, let me grab it here. Actually here in the book, in the back, let me flip to it. So after the last page of the story, it says, dedicated with impervious love to the ever-burning light that is Isaiah Ike Owens. You remain my soul's ally and my best friend. Thank you for making the mundane surreal. So, question.
Yeah.
I, as a reader, I read basically cover to cover. So I read The Magic of We by Danielle Anderson-Craig, illustrated by Carly Juling. And sometimes if there is a dedication, maybe not every single time, but if there is a dedication, I will read it. And if there's kind of something special like that at the end of the book, I will read it. I feel like that's part of the author's story. And so, I'll start off by saying, when you do your read-alouds or your, book readings and signings, do you always read that kind of final line that's attributed to Ike, or do the children begin to ever ask questions? I mean, what kind of comes up in your public readings, and how often does Ike himself and the fact that this book is a tribute to him because of his passing kind of come up, and how does I want to find a way into that conversation?
Yeah, this is a great conversation, and one that is loaded and layered, and let's just jump right in.
Cool.
Yeah. So when I read the book to children at a school visit or at a bookstore, I typically do not read the dedication. And I want to start by saying that, as a preschool teacher who's been teaching for a very long time and serving families for a very long time, I have the utmost respect for the fact that conversations about death, just like conversations about sex or conversations about religion, are deeply personal to each family, and each family has a right to crack that and to jump into that as they see fit. And my role as an educator, or my role as a writer, is not to impose my way or my timeline about having those conversations on anyone's journey as parents. And so I typically don't read that part of the book, the dedication. And I really want to hear actually from people and from you and Yazzie today, how you deal with that when you read the book to Langston or Ellison, and how the conversations go on your end.
You want to start?
On my end, I do talk about Ike when I'm talking about why I wrote the book. I'll say, or if I'm talking about the characters and kind of having a talk back with the kids around what can we glean about these two characters, and then somehow I'll bring up the fact that the inspiration for the book was my best friend. And then what gets tricky here is I just have to be careful about verb tense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll say, this friendship means the world to me. Or I'll say something like, when I was writing this book, I was thinking about my best friend, and my best friend really loved music. And this best friend who loved music grew up and played music because they loved it so much. And then typically kids won't ask me, why are you saying loved as opposed to loves, And so I talk about what it means to kind of engross yourself in a craft and then grow up and make it your life's work. When we're talking about the characters who love books and who love music. And then that way I talk about Ike, and I play the music for them always. And I say his name then. And as long as I don't spend too much time in the past tense when I'm talking about Ike, it doesn't come up. Okay. They don't pick up on the fact that I'm talking about someone who is no longer here, or they don't feel the need to stop me there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was going to ask, I know that, we haven't really mentioned this, but some of Ike's previously unreleased music is available with some purchases of the book as a vinyl record.
Yeah. So inside of the book, everyone can have access to the download code where you can just download the music. So the music comes with every copy of the book, but as a 7-inch vinyl, that's a special special edition version.
Gotcha. Okay.
For those who just love vinyl.
Dope. Keeping it jiggy with the vinyl.
Yep,
I like that. Keeping it analog.
Yes.
I like that. I like that. I know Ike would approve of that.
Absolutely.
What you just said is dead on. I mean, dead on. Sorry, no pun intended. Sex and death are like the two most taboo subjects when it comes to people in general. I mean, whenever I talk about it openly, whenever I talk about death, like in the context of these fraught last week where these two celebrities, died of suicide. I'm told to say, as opposed to committed suicide, which makes it sound more like a crime. Basically what I've realized with Langston and with the boys is that I talk about death fairly openly and fairly frequently because of the amount of times that I've been touched by it in my own life. So I feel like it's important to build up some understanding of it. I think death is extremely difficult to grasp for a child in the same way that the number 0 is not a natural concept to the mind. The idea of absence of something less than 1 is very difficult to wrap your mind around. So I don't really think that my children get it. I don't even think at the age of 10 for Langston that he really understands what a permanent goodbye is. So what I feel like I'm doing is I'm laying bricks in a foundation that will enable him to, at some later point, make some sense out of what it means. But, until like a grandparent passes, or until, he truly understands what it means, until it happens to someone, I don't think that there's any preparation that really prepares us for it. All we can do is sort of like what I like about what you described is what we can describe is the value of people's lives. What we can do is describe why a person is important now and why you should leave no things unsaid, and why you should foster your friendships as deeply as possible, and try to create that connection as vibrantly as possible while it's possible, because at some point it's impossible. and that's hard to that's a hard thing to explain to a child. I think that an awareness of death brightens life, but I'm a fairly neurotic individual, so I'm not sure.
I actually would agree with you, Yaze. I think that an awareness of death entirely does brighten life, and I think that that even us as adults, we don't really know how to make sense of it. I think that there's no way to prepare for it as an adult, just like there isn't a way to prepare for it as a child. I mean, I still to this day sometimes bump my head up against, like, how is Ike not here? Like, he's supposed to be here with me.
Right.
We're supposed to be in each other's corner forever, and we are, right? And in this way that is still sometimes doesn't make sense to me.
I resonate with that strongly. You may or may not know, my brother was murdered when I was 18. And
I do know that, Yaze. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. We're bound by our survivorship, and like, because the other thing that doesn't get talked about is that bereavement is a lifelong process. There's never a moment, I still have, I have them less frequently, but I still have these weird dreams that are incredibly vibrant sometimes, where I imagine him alive, like these entire scenarios abstracted from like what could have been, like ages that he never lived to, family reunions, things of this nature. And you wake up and it's like, I used to be very sad. I used to wake up very sad, like, oh God, that would have been nice. But now I've started, it's an odd thing. Time has transmuted the pain into, like, now it's almost like a window into what could have been. And there is some joy in knowing that, or at least feeling that on some level, in some universe, maybe in another parallel dimension, like that, that relationship still endures, and that there's all this possibility that I'm not aware of, so. Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. I like to think of those, I have dreams of Ike all the time, and I like to think of them as visits. I don't, like you were saying, I don't wake up from them sad anymore. I wake up kind of in this weird way, like electrified by the fact that he was just with me.
I so feel that, and I feel that so profoundly right now, because I just finished reading this book that I highly recommend to you guys. It's by one of my favorite authors, N.K. Jemisin, this Black woman who writes fantasy, and she has 2 books written in this series called The Dream Blood. And the idea is, one of the basic ideas is that we live in dreams as much as we live in waking, and and that in dreams we all go after our deaths in this book. And so, like, even after somebody is gone, we have this access to them, that we can go visit them in the world in dreams. And I think that's something that we need to relearn in our society, is because I have this strange feeling that a lot of the discontent and the depression and the sadness and disconnection from life stems from a lack of acceptance of a finality. There's this Mel, maybe you can help me out because I'm bad with names, but you know, this heavyset light-skinned woman, she does these series of monologues, like once a year she comes out with this monologue or something, like on a different subject. But one of the last ones was on death, and the way she ended the play was, it's just all these various characters who were dealing with death, and the last one was this Buddhist monk, and at the end of it, she's ringing this bell, and she uses the word finished as opposed, to describe death. And I thought that's such a powerful word to associate with death, finished, as opposed to ended or dead, or, but finished in the sense like of a good meal, finished with 8 hours of deep sleep, but complete in a way that we never are in living. It's funny that we're talking about Ike, because I haven't thought about him in a long time. And I'm listening to you talk about him, and I know that you loved him so much. And it's like in these moments right now, it's like he lives. We resurrect and remember him right now. And I think there is something special about that relationship with somebody once they're finished, once they're complete. That, like you said, like you're in it for life with this person. You're still in it. You're still in it with him. Even though his work on this plane of existence is finished, you're not finished.
I think that's where, if I can jump in, I'm trying to remember all the things I wanted to say about it, is one thing that I do try to impart to Langston, really. He's older, he's 9, the little one is only 3, so he really has no concept. Right now, he's still grasping that when I leave to go run an errand, I'm coming back. It's like, oh, you're back, I missed you. Or I go to take a shower, I'll come back, he's like, I missed you.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you were gone, I didn't see you, but you came back. So, for Langston, though, he hasn't lost someone very close to him. And I think it is still very much an abstract concept. So when I read the book to him, I have read the dedication, but he has not asked additional questions.
Right.
So I have not forced a conversation about it. Our experience to now in regards to death has kind of been, I've let him lead the way a bit. So if I am discussing someone from my life who has passed, my grandmother, my cousin, a relationship that, as you guys have said, I'm kind of ongoing in the grieving process at various days and times. I sometimes will talk about that just to share. This is part of the breadth of human emotions, and this is sometimes something that you feel. This is what I'm feeling. My cousin, who I was really close to and really influenced me heavily towards being an actress, she's buried here in Los Angeles, in Glendale. So I go visit her grave a lot, relatively, and I've taken both my children there. They've helped me pick out flowers and find the graveside and kind of spend time there, and they're never uncomfortable. My older son specifically, he's not uncomfortable, and I'm so grateful for that in the few and kind of small ways that he's been exposed to it, I want to make it not seem like something scary. That when people in your life pass on, it can be sad and a lot of feelings come up, but you don't need to be afraid. And as you kind of just said, there are ways by remembering them and celebrating them and what they meant to you or experiences you had with them, they can still live and you can still find joy in your relationship and in their life. At his school, they often do a Dia de los Muertos celebration. Yeah. And of course, recently in pop culture, the movies Coco, and before that, it was The Book of Life. So I love so much that our like American children basically are being exposed to a cultural tradition where you always are celebrating those who have passed, and you do that by remembering them and their favorite things. And it's not about forgetting or pushing it to the back of your mind to not ever feel sad, but seeing how they can kind of coexist together. I think the most kind of direct way that he's ever experienced it, and the most direct conversation, I had another friend who her dad passed, and I took Langston to the funeral or the wake. And when we got to the church or the, hall, her and her mother were sitting like in the front row. So we kind of had to walk down the aisle to basically give them a hug. And as I did that, I noticed that Langston, who was maybe like 5 at the time, was basically eye level with the casket.
Oh, wow.
Which was about 5 feet in front of us. And I didn't, obviously when I walked in, I was like, where's this person? Let me hug her mom. Not really thinking about that. And after I hugged, I looked down to see Langston staring straight ahead, like, whoa, and realizing he had never seen a dead body before. And, after that, we kind of went to this other area where the kids more were, and I definitely was like, hey, let's do a quick check-in. Like, do you know what you just saw? And I'm kind of being really careful not to really impose a lot on the experience, but really seeing what it was for him. And he could kind of correctly, he knew what we were doing. He did kind of correctly identify to kind of like, that's her dad. And,
Did he also go to, your aunt's?
That was after.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and at my aunt's funeral, we never really got to the casket. But that was another experience because her sister, one of my other aunts, was like wailing, full on, bawling, and kind of falling over. So, little by little, he has been exposed to death and the grieving process and seeing kind of how varied that can be for people. And I find that the through line for me currently is letting him come to it as he feels moved, and primarily always being someone that he feels he can trust and talk to and ask questions or share. And then when he asks, I try to really focus on, yes, you are feeling this sad emotion, but let's not remember this person in just sadness. If they meant so much to you that you feel this way, then let's really spend some time celebrating those things about them that you loved, that made you feel loved, that lessons we can learn from how they live their life. What can we take from that? How can we celebrate that? Not just every day, anytime you think about them. And it's okay to cry or feel sad, but that it doesn't have to end there. Yeah. And that and honestly, you can be invigorated or excited by the memory of them.
And honestly, not to be too neurotic about it, but also it's important for me to understand, like, don't worry, buddy, you'll also die. So it's not. I hate to say it like that, but it's like one of the things that I had to realize.
I hope you find it to spin that one.
Yeah, I bring it to him a little more gently than that, but no, actually I don't. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't. I constantly I'm constantly reminding him, like, well, everyone's life is finite, including yours, and that right now you're young and you have a good deal of time ahead of you, but eventually the trip ends, and I think that is important to understand from a very early age, to understand like what you've gotten yourself into. Like, and one of the things that
what two of you got him into.
Well, exactly. Here's what you've been invited to. Here's what you've been invited to. Because I think that is part of keeping the credibility with the child. Is that I don't want to, is like, I'm not trying to sell him that life is this universally beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing, but it's not life itself. The whole thing is not just for human beings. It's for the whole ecosystem of beings and sentient beings throughout the whole, planet and universe by extension. And so some of the universe is for you, some of it is for your benefit and for your pleasure and your enjoyment. And some of the universe, the vast majority of it, has nothing to do with you, really. It's like it's for plants and animals and bumblebees and mitochondria and all this kind of stuff or whatever. And so that there is this sense of, in death, I feel like there's an important lesson that we're only borrowing the energy that we are. We're only borrowing this energy temporarily. It's not ours. And I think that underpins a larger worldview that I want my son to have, if it's at all possible. But this understanding that these things that we consider to be material, to be unchanging, these institutions, these bodies, our ability, all these things are in the midst of change. They're in the midst of breaking down. They're in the midst of leaving us, even as we're enjoying them. And it's not a bad thing, because that energy is going to another place, and it's also going to be used.
I think that's honestly, not to be like too cheesy about it, but that is really one of the great things about art. Like, he's come back around to watching The Lion King like over and over and over, and it really does share that concept that people die. But they don't have to leave you. Or even in Black Panther, which he's also seen, like you can be in community with those who have come before you. And, in this book as well.
I was just looking at the book.
I mean, that's what I'm coming to. It's I think art is a very useful tool to basically talk about life and humanity and our feelings and experiences, and death is a part of life.
I was just looking at the cover of the book and realizing that, the boy character looks exactly like Ike.
Oh, you missed that part of the conversation when she was sharing that in working with the illustrator, Carly Dooling, she would sometimes send images. There's images of her and Ike together. There's images of Ike as a young boy that she sent to him. So she basically shared a lot of kind of personal images that she wanted to gently influence.
I love it.
The illustrations.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I love what she did with it too, and I also
we geeked out on that.
Want to jump in to say that. When I talk about the characters, I do give the one in the dress kind of gender, and I might say she, but I purposely leave the other character open, and I say they.
I didn't notice, but I can dig.
I mean, I've had kids who were twins of the same gender expression and of not the same gender expression, see themselves reflected in this. And I've had people ask me like, oh, is this two girls or is this, and I just always say they, I purposely
that's great.
Choose to not say boy or he for the other character.
I can dig it.
I love that so much.
Yeah, that's kind of like on some Rumi, it's just the beloved.
I love that. And I think part of what's so beautiful again about the book is that it distills it so much to the magic of an interaction with someone.
Yes.
It's not about their gender or what they look like, or you know what I mean? It's like, what can we do together? What is it when two people come together?
Yeah.
And
also not just even if we're not genderizing them, I do love the fact that they are portrayed in all their melanated glory.
Oh, we talked about that as well.
You know, I think there is nothing wrong with a little identity, and I love the fact that they look like
that
carefree,
was very intentional.
You know, carefree black boy or
all
girl.
Of it
right.
was very intentional in
I like there's this reference to like where the wild things are, and you got black mermaids. I mean, you packed a whole lot. There's a whole lot of imagery packed into.
I told her it was almost like a visual poem in a book.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. The more repeated readings of it, that's the feeling I get.
Yeah, yeah. And I love what you were saying, which brought us onto the subject. The idea of, you know, immortalization through art. You know, that is one of the things that makes us human is our ability to remember things through symbolic portrayal, you know, and in a way, when you think about it, like an Ike is going to live longer than the vast majority of us who have no books to recall us, who know, you know, I'm still waiting for somebody to tell my story. I hope my kids get to it or something.
What's astounding about Ike as well is that it's not just this book. I mean, there's so much music.
Yeah,
right.
You know, like he himself embodied that. Yeah. He was like the beacon of light.
Yeah, absolutely.
Showing the way. This is how you do it.
Absolutely.
You know, on that note, actually, before Ike passed away, I'd say about maybe like in the month of September, like the month before he passed away, you know, every time we saw each other, he would talk to me about like, all right, so what's going on with your books? Like, what are we doing with it? And in September, he told me like, you know, the whole point of all this is to leave something behind.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
and then can we just talk about how weird it is and how amazing it is that one of the songs that this book includes is Ike covering Kendrick Lamar's "Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst."
Whoa. That's the other thing. As I'm talking to her, it's like the layers that surround her journey of this, writing this book, coming to it, the writing it, and then everything that is coming after it is kind of astounding.
Well, I mean, not to toot our own horn, but we're kind of tuned in people, you know. we're looking for the frequency, you know what I mean? So
definitely,
right.
But
truly,
yes.
But I think that's why death is so profound for all people, because it's one of those events. It's the event that makes. I love your dedication where it says thanks for making the mundane surreal, and I think death is one of the things that does that. That it's one of those inarguable rites or transitions or flashbulb events that, you know, connect a group of people or connect our consciousness.
Yeah.
And it completely shifts our perspective. Like 1 minute the universe is a certain way, and then it's the universe minus something, but plus something else. You know, something has fundamentally changed. Yeah. And I really get that feeling from the book and the imagery of it. It's like, even though it doesn't have to mention death, but for all I know, one of these characters is a psychopomp leading the other one into the great beyond. You know what I mean? Like it's written with there's a sort of a coded symbolism in the imagery that I'm not even sure that you intended, but it's there for me. And perhaps because I know some of what motivated it, but I definitely feel like some of the fantastic imagery and that kind of thing, and the journey that these characters are going through, there is a way to interpret that as sort of like, this is what it feels like to let go and to go beyond, you know, and even as you go beyond, you're not alone, you know. So
I love that.
Beautiful.
I love that, and I love that this book lends itself to multiple interpretations over multiple readings.
Yeah.
You know, it's not only will different people experience it differently, the same person can have a new experience.
Exactly.
On a different moment of reading it.
Bam.
I'm glad to hear that.
Which I think is incredibly difficult to do. Like, the more I think about it, I'm like, how the fuck did you do that?
Yeah. It means you gotta write many more books, is what that means. I think that's what I think that's what we're saying that way.
Well, Ike would definitely agree with you there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that being said, I think I'm going to...
I'm so glad that you chimed in on this.
I thank you guys for having me. You know, I'm always privileged when the ladies invite me to the conversation, which I think is going to be
good.
I was going to say, which I think is going to be something that you hear from men a lot more in the days to come. Is that we're going to be? I'm reading this book right now,
hopefully,
called The Power. If you guys have, it's billed as one of Obama's favorite reads of 2017. The premise of which is that due to environmental pressures or some sort of whatever, 15-year-old girls across the world begin developing the power to discharge electricity from their hands and cause agonizing pain in men.
Can you? Oh, shit.
And what happens to the world?
Yeah, they
order,
better be 15 and not 35.
And what happens? Well, here's the catch though: is that the 15-year-old girls can teach older women how to do the trick and pass the trick on.
Yes.
And I'm only 2 chapters into it, and I'm like,
terrified?
Oh goodness,
are you scared?
I'm just like I said. Thank you for having me in the conversation. I'm very honored to be here.
Great. You keep reading that book. I like this.
Yes, I'm on it. Thank you, Danielle, for having me, and I'm super proud to be your friend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Don't even pause it. I'm gonna wrap up. I've got a few more questions, and then we'll be editing that a little bit. But
you know what though? I wanted to add one thing that Yaze's that he touched on.
Okay.
He talked about the black mermaids.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just take a quick second to acknowledge the divine feminine, the black mermaid.
Amen.
When I was a little girl, all I wanted to do was be a mother mermaid. It's all I wanted to do. I wanted to just go back into the womb and come out as a mermaid. And I was like upset about it every single time that I was in water. Like, why are they not fusing together and growing scales? What is the problem? So I looked for mermaids who looked at me all the time in my childhood, and they simply weren't there. So it was really important to me to give the gift of reflection to all of the POC children who are mermaids and merfolk and mer beings and are looking to see themselves reflected in the world. And I hope that they can add this to their collection and be encouraged on their mermaid Imrama forward.
I love that. You know, Langston, the illustrator side of him, definitely talked about that. He was like, oh, wow. He was like, look at the mermaids and mermen. And I think, again, as a young boy of color, a black boy, I would be hard pressed to think of another book that he's read either here at home or at school that had a depiction of mer people, merfolk of color. Yeah. So immediately that jumped out at him. And he commented on it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad. Yay.
Okay, to kind of start to wrap up, some kind of quick questions, hopefully kind of easy to answer. Are you, I know right now you're kind of still full swing in touring and promoting this book and sharing the work. I know you mentioned that now you're kind of revisiting some of your poetry and looking to maybe in the future, obviously, edit that together and publish. Do you also alongside want to continue writing children's books or kids lit?
Oh, absolutely.
Literature.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
Do you think that that's something, I mean, have you started working on are you starting to kind of jot down any new ideas, images, and kind of bones for an idea? Or is it just
Carly
kind
and
of,
I have thing in the making, but if I tell you about it,
of course,
yes,
of course not. We just want to know how how much of the stew is beginning to cook. So
the stew is it's simmering. It's on the stove, and there's rice and meat up in there.
Yes.
So
well, I love that. Well, we're here for the long haul. So crock pot it up, take your time, and I'm very excited that there is another collaboration between you two coming.
Thanks.
I guess my next question would be, please tell all of our listeners, although I will also be sure to include it in show notes and in all of my communications, but where can we purchase this fine book, The Magic of We?
Yes, you can purchase The Magic of We at thirdmanrecords.com and or thirdmanbooks.com. And you can look for the special edition copy that comes with vinyl of some previously unreleased Ike music, including the cover that we just talked about of Kendrick Lamar's Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst. Or you can publish an edition that comes with the music as a download code without the vinyl as well.
That is so wonderful. Just kind of a random, who are your favorite 3 writers, Danielle? This across all genres, poets, fiction, nonfiction. If you had to narrow it down to 3, I know it's not fair because I have a library as well. But if you had to,
not even a thing. If I had to give you 3, that's just not a thing.
Okay, well, who are 3 that maybe at the time of reading a piece of their work you felt impacted you significantly, at least in the time?
Yes, okay, I can do that for sure. Let's see. When I first read Jitterbug Perfume by Tom Robbins, it was so decadent and gorgeous, and I loved it so much that I got from in Costa Rica every day in the cloud forest for like 6 weeks. Like I would read the book and then start over again. Because I'm just obsessive like that. But after I came home, true to my obsessive nature, I got a jasmine flower spray, like a spray of jasmine flowers going from like the back of my right shoulder all the way to like the top of my right hip.
Yeah.
As an homage to the experience and the journey that book gave to me. So Jitterbug Perfume counts as one of my absolute top favorite books. So I'd have to talk about Tom Robbins then.
Okay.
What else? Right now, I'm reading, there's 2 poets who I'm really into right now, and I will share their names. So right now, I'm really into Janaka Stuckey, and he's on Third Man, which is how I found him.
Okay.
And I just really love his poetry, like a lot. Like if I'm out and about in the world and I need to just pass the time in between doing things, the first thing I do before grabbing my phone to look at an Instagram story is I'm looking at Janaka Stuckey's book that I keep in my purse. So that's that I love. And, I mean, what Beyonce is to pop culture, Toni Morrison is to literature for me. So I gotta say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have to agree with you there. That's is. Okay. And I guess what are your final thoughts or advice or insights about being a writer and putting using words and putting them out into the world?
I would say do it. The thing that Ike was always saying to me was, do it, make it happen, do it. And so that's kind of what I find most important and most valuable and most succinct and most effective as like an injection of anything is just to be told that your work is important. Your work is someone in the world is waiting to hear it. And do it because it sets you free. Do it because it makes you feel alive, and do it because someone's waiting for it.
That really, I love that because I think any artist can really draw from that. And I think, as you just said, your voice, your individual voice is really the key. When you're filled with self-doubt or insecurities, I think for me, as I'm learning, one of the guiding lights is that even when you feel down or you're not sure or you're scared, come back to the fact that you do matter. You are worthy. You have value. And it isn't so much for what everyone else thinks. It's like, you've got to know, take heart and be comforted by your own expression and letting that lead you, and that feeling of being alive, of putting something out there, of not being afraid of yourself and like your own potential power, I think, is something that we all need. And when you can give that to children, when you can make that accessible, that they have this magic, that they can just be, and that's important, then I just think that that's really, where we all need to get back to and point back to. I guess lastly, I can't even really say how much I have enjoyed talking with you, Danielle. You're such a dear friend. And what I love too is the 2 times that I've done this, it's like, even though I know these people and I've known you for even longer, I learned so much more.
I'm so, so, so glad to have been able to share this time with you. And just kind of hunker down into the nitty gritty of it all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel like we had a little. Thank you. I feel like we had a little magic of we ourselves.
Well, we have
the last couple of hours.
16 and 17.
Too. Freaking crazy.
Yes.
All right, lady. Tell the peoples, where can we find you personally on Instagram or Twitter or whatever social media you use to share your writings about Magic of We, or anything else you want to let us know to keep an eye out for?
Happy to do that. My Instagram is at Danielle Anderson-Craig. Should I spell that for people? No, that seems unnecessary.
I will put it in the show notes and stuff if for some reason they are a little unclear on what it is.
And then Twitter is at D Anderson-Craig. I don't really use Twitter a lot, but it's there.
All right, fantastic. Well, we will be, hopefully you'll gain some more followers and more readers and more people who can share in this beautiful piece of work and art that you have brought forth. I'm feeling mad lofty now. I'm like, way into my English degree right now. I'm like, yes, let's just talk more literature, please. Let's just go on all day.
Mad lofty. I love it.
I'm about to start speaking in old English.
Love it. Way to bring it back.
Right? Well,
yeah, good job.
Danielle, I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for listening to Off the Page with Melissa K, my second little baby installment. And we hope that you join us again in the near future for another interview with a close friend of mine who is doing wonderful things. Thank you so much for listening. Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Danielle. I also hope that our talk leaves you feeling a little more inspired or motivated to continue on your own artistic journey. Danielle can be found on social media at Danielle Anderson-Craig on Instagram, and for Twitter, you can find her at D Anderson-Craig. I'll leave links to Third Man Books if you'd like to purchase your own copy of The Magic of We. It makes a great gift for the little magical beings in your life. I'm also on social media. On Instagram, you can find me at Melissa K. Anderson and at Melissa K. Says on Twitter. As I mentioned briefly, I co-host a weekly podcast with my husband called Woke with Kids. We talk a lot about politics, news affecting the diaspora, and entertainment, all while navigating our roles as artsy-fartsy parents of 2 young black boys. If you're so woke you don't know if you should laugh or cry, check us out at Woke with Kids. Thank you again for listening. Until the next time.